House number 1470 on Sunnybrook Drive, United States, was once a place of cozy dinners and youthful dreams. But on a quiet summer night in 2018, it suddenly turned into the scene of a devastating tragedy. Before we get to that tragic night, it's important to understand who Stephen Freeman was, the man who once called that house home. Born on January 1, 1995 in Thomasville County, Georgia, Stephen's early years were shaped by financial hardship. Just a few years later, his family relocated to Griffin City in search of better opportunities. There, Stephen grew up in a warm and loving environment. In that very household, his parents were deeply committed to giving Stephen and his older brother the best foundation possible. Every effort was made to ensure the boys had not just what they needed materially, but also emotionally and spiritually. The results of that upbringing quickly became clear in Stephen's personality. His childhood was filled with happiness, and people naturally gravitated toward him. He was cheerful, optimistic, and always smiling. No matter the situation, Stephen could find a reason to be hopeful. Behind his joyful demeanor was a rich inner world, nurtured by family love, especially the bond he shared with his mother. When she made the decision to return to school and pursue higher education, Stephen was incredibly proud. Her determination inspired him deeply. On the day she received her diploma, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing how proud he was, thanking her for everything she had done for him and his brother. Not long after, another meaningful relationship began to take shape in Stephen's life. While in high school, he met Mary Catherine Hickton, a classmate 1 year his senior. They quickly grew close, bonding over shared interests and a love for the outdoors. Mary Catherine enjoyed camping, and she often joined Stephen and his tight-knit group of friends on overnight trips into the woods. Her connection with the group wasn't just because of shared hobbies. Her bold personality and openness played a big part. She wasn't intimidated by rough terrain or firearms, and her comfort in those settings made her stand out. Stephen's friends took to her quickly, recognizing how her presence brought out a happier version of him. Before long, she became a regular fixture at every group gathering, but their connection wasn't limited to weekend trips. The closeness between Stephen and Mary Catherine was also rooted in similar upbringings. Mary Catherine came from a loving home and was known for singing and dancing during family gatherings from a young age. Energetic, creative, and with a deep affection for both nature and animals, she made a strong impression, especially on Stephen. As they entered adulthood, the couple began building a life together beyond the comfort of their families. After graduating high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine moved in together. Stephen worked for a roofing repair company, while Mary Catherine became a teaching assistant at a local preschool. Over time, their relationship matured just as they did. By 2018, Stephen was 23 and Mary Catherine was 24. They had been together for 7 years, long enough to experience the full range of emotions that come with a long-term relationship. Like many couples, they sometimes faced disagreements. At times, arguments escalated into serious conflicts, even leading to a brief breakup. But even during the moments they were apart, they always found their way back to each other as if nothing had ever broken. After every rough patch, their desire to stay together became even stronger. Their bond gradually gained full acceptance from both families. Mary Catherine often spent Sundays at Stephen's home, joining in on family dinners. That closeness extended to the deeper family connections. Stephen's mother was especially fond of Mary Catherine, treating her like a daughter. During the holidays, both families would come together as one. Of all the celebrations, Christmas was always the most special, held in the warmth of the house on Sunnybrook Drive, but not every holiday gathering brought peace. It was in that very familiar home that on the night of August 1, 2018, everything changed. Around 11 p.m., the sound of sirens pierced the quiet street, red and blue lights flashing across the windows. An ambulance and patrol car pulled up silently in front of 1470 Sunnybrook Drive. What had prompted such an urgent response became clear moments later. Emergency dispatch had received several frantic calls from a woman named Mary Catherine. Her voice broke through sobs as she struggled to explain what had happened inside the home they had shared for years. Between gasps and tears, Mary Catherine said she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. Still crying, she described a chaotic scene and insisted she had only been trying to hand Stephen a gun. As she passed it over, it unexpectedly went off. She claimed she had no idea the gun had been loaded. By the time first responders arrived, they found Stephen lying motionless on a mattress in the middle of the living room. Mary Catherine was kneeling beside him, emotionally overwhelmed, sobbing uncontrollably and calling out his name. When officers tried to move her aside to allow paramedics space to help Stephen, Mary Catherine resisted. She refused to leave his side, pushing them away and screaming that she couldn't lose him. Eventually, after multiple attempts to calm her, emergency personnel were able to reach Stephen. Though his condition was critical and his pulse was faint, he was still responsive. The medical team immediately rushed him to the hospital. Only after he was safely transported were officers able to sit down and begin speaking with Mary Catherine. Even then, communication was difficult. Mary Catherine remained hysterical, frequently breaking into tears and struggling to speak. She could only repeat what she had already told dispatch, that the shooting was accidental and that she never meant for any of it to happen. According to her continued account, Mary Catherine insisted that she hadn't even pointed the gun at Stephen, but it went off unexpectedly. The bullet struck his upper chest, causing severe trauma near the neck. Although paramedics tried to stop the bleeding on site, the blood loss was too extensive. Stephen was pronounced dead at the hospital just before midnight. While Mary Catherine remained in a state of emotional shock, investigators at the scene began to notice inconsistencies in her story. Certain physical clues suggested that something else may have occurred before the gunshot. At the same time, the kitchen area painted a chaotic picture. Food had been spilled across the countertops and scattered on the tile floor. Several chairs were knocked out of place and various items had fallen off shelves lying in disarray. It appeared that a heated argument, possibly involving physical aggression, had taken place before the shooting. As investigators examined the scene more closely, they also noticed a strong smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. Still overwhelmed by emotion, she spoke in broken sentences with little coherence. Given the circumstances, officers decided to escort her to the station for further questioning. She didn't resist and quietly left the scene with them. In the interrogation room, Mary Catherine repeated her claim that the entire incident had been a tragic accident. She stated that she had never planned or intended to hurt Stephen in any way. He had been the closest person in her life for years, and as she said, there was no reason for her to ever harm him intentionally. To support her explanation, she told investigators that guns and hunting had long been shared interests between the two of them. According to her, they had collected several firearms together, but always kept them on safety mode and never loaded them in advance. Mary Catherine firmly stated she was genuinely shocked to discover that the gun had fired at all. However, as the interrogation progressed, her description of the moment the gun discharged began to shift. She now said that while handing the gun to Stephen with a tossing motion, the trigger was somehow activated and the bullet fired. This new detail did not go unnoticed. Her revised account conflicted with what she initially told police at the scene, where she had claimed she was simply passing the gun to Stephen in a normal way. Now she was saying she had tossed a loaded weapon in his direction. This inconsistency forced investigators to re-examine the entire context of the case. They realized that Mary Catherine was no stranger to firearms. In addition to working at a local preschool, she also had a second job at a nearby gun store. What's more, Mary Catherine wasn't just familiar with guns, she had received formal training. According to her, her knowledge of firearms even surpassed Stephen's. As an employee in a firearms retail environment, She was required to fully understand all safety regulations regarding the handling and storage of weapons. Because of this, investigators, many of whom had spent years being trained in firearm safety, found Mary Catherine's explanation increasingly difficult to accept. For someone who had undergone formal training and worked at a gun store, tossing a loaded firearm wasn't just reckless. It was knowingly endangering herself and the person across from her. To them, this wasn't a panicked reflex. It was a direct violation of fundamental safety protocols that every firearm user is expected to follow. Based on this assessment, the investigators decided to change tactics. One of them confronted Mary Catherine directly, stating clearly that they didn't believe her version of events. She was accused of being dishonest, and the inconsistencies were laid out one by one. The chaos in the kitchen, the smell of alcohol on her breath, and the conflicting statements she had given earlier. The pressure quickly took its toll. As the tone of the questioning became more intense, Mary Catherine broke down in tears. According to the investigators, it was in this emotional moment that she admitted she had pulled the trigger out of anger. Ironically, just as she made this confession, a technical failure occurred in the interrogation room. While the video continued to record, the audio system malfunctioned. As a result, everything Mary Catherine said, including her admission that she had fired the gun, was not captured on tape. Investigators were visibly frustrated knowing that one of the most critical pieces of evidence would be inadmissible in court. Still, the investigation pressed forward. Mary Catherine was arrested and later formally charged with murder. Prosecutors believed there was enough evidence to proceed with the case. In addition to physical evidence and a clear motive, the prosecution focused heavily on the contradictions in her statements. From this, investigators argued that Mary Catherine was fully aware of what she was doing when she used the firearm. She had experience handling weapons at her workplace and often spoke knowledgeably about them. To them, her actions at night didn't reflect a momentary lapse in judgment, but rather a deliberate decision. Even the gun itself raised suspicion. Its oiled interior suggested it had been prepared in advance, not simply left lying around as part of a tragic accident. Further fueling their theory was the effort she had put into preparing dinner that evening. She had cooked grilled beef, Stephen's favorite dish, as a gesture of affection. But just minutes later, everything spiraled out of control. Food ended up scattered across the kitchen. A gunshot rang out and Stephen Freeman was gone forever. As the investigation widened, a dedicated team reached out to close friends and family of the couple, those who might offer insight into their relationship. All were shocked by the news of Stephen's death, and nearly every one of them voiced the same concern. They found it hard to believe this had happened and even harder to believe Mary Catherine's version of events, especially since she was the only person present at the scene when it all happened. According to what Stephen's friends had personally heard from him, this wasn't the first time Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at her boyfriend. On multiple occasions during their relationship, she had displayed such behavior, raising increasing concern among those close to them about the volatility of their relationship. In the beginning, things between them seemed relatively calm. They went on camping trips together, raised pets, and bonded over their shared love of nature. But within just a few years, things started to unravel. Mary Catherine became increasingly prone to yelling, anger easily, and often lost her temper over minor issues. These developments left Stephen feeling suffocated. He frequently had to leave the apartment just to find a moment of peace for himself. At one point, he even tried blocking Mary Catherine's phone number, but she kept calling over and over, making it impossible for him to escape the constant pressure. And it wasn't just Stephen who said this. A coworker of his later testified that Mary Catherine had once called Stephen around 30 times before his shift even began. More troubling still, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern that repeated almost daily. Around that same period on April 21, 2018, 3 months before he was killed, Stephen sent a text to a friend. In it, he described Mary Catherine running around their apartment screaming with a gun in her hand, saying she would shoot both of them. It didn't stop there. About a month later, Stephen messaged that same friend again, sharing that Mary Catherine had disengaged the safety and racked the slide of a gun right in front of him. While she had pointed weapons at him before, this time felt fundamentally different. Her eyes no longer showed mere anger or threat. What he saw made him genuinely believe she might pull the trigger. Realizing the danger had escalated beyond his control, Stephen decided to end the toxic relationship and start fresh in a different city. A close friend offered to let him stay temporarily. Stephen planned to pack up his things while Mary Catherine was at work, hoping to leave quietly without confrontation. The escape was set for August 3rd, but before he could leave, the signs of danger in their relationship had already surfaced many times. Stephen had never filed an official police report about Mary Catherine's threats. However, during the investigation, police discovered they had been called to the couple's apartment 5 times within a single year. In several of those cases, the calls were due to loud arguments and disturbances inside the home. Even so, just 2 days before the shooting on July 30th, Stephen and Mary Catherine were still exchanging affectionate messages. They wished each other a good day and reaffirmed their love for one another. But the very next day, on July 31st, everything changed. A violent argument broke out, prompting Stephen to leave the apartment and stay temporarily at a friend's house. He cut off all contact with Mary Catherine. Every call and message from her was ignored. In a conversation with his mother, Stephen made it clear he was never going back to that place again. On the following day, August 1st, Mary Catherine made another attempt to reach Stephen. When he didn't respond, she cooked dinner herself, hoping that this ordinary gesture might bring him home. But Stephen remained silent and didn't return to the apartment. Frustrated, she called Stephen's mother to ask where he was. It was during that call that she learned he had spent the night at a friend's house, a man named Thomas. Refusing to let the situation continue in silence, Mary Catherine got in her car and went looking for him. While driving, she spotted Thomas's vehicle with Stephen sitting in the back seat. She pulled up alongside, rolled down the window, and confronted him, asking if he intended to come home. After a tense exchange, Stephen, tired and eager to avoid another confrontation, reluctantly agreed and switched into her car. What he didn't realize was that this would be the beginning of a carefully laid trap. A loaded gun awaited him back at the apartment. Hours later, Stephen Freeman was shot and pronounced dead at the hospital. That moment marked the start of a dramatic legal battle. As the trial began, prosecutors argued that Stephen's death was not an accident, it was a deliberate and cruel act. They claimed that Mary Catherine had prepared Stephen's favorite dinner in hopes of luring him home. But when he didn't show, her disappointment turned into rage. To support this claim, they presented physical evidence: grease stains on the gun and blood stains on the bed sheet. To strengthen the case, investigators performed a detailed crime scene analysis. Stains on the corner of the bed and surrounding area indicated that Stephen may have been sitting upright when shot, then collapsed backward onto the mattress. In court, friends, relatives, and co-workers took the stand one by one. Each emphasized the instability in Stephen and Mary Catherine's relationship. Their testimony painted a consistent picture of Mary Catherine as controlling, aggressive, and deeply concerning to those around them. Adding to the case, the lead prosecutor highlighted the fact that Mary Catherine had changed her statement 6 times during the investigation. Each version differed, some minor revisions, others complete shifts in narrative. These contradictions raised serious doubts among the jury about her credibility. However, when the courtroom doors opened for Mary Catherine's next session, the story took a different turn. This time, she no longer called it an accident. She claimed her actions were done in self-defense. Her legal team quickly backed this claim by introducing a completely new version of events. According to them, Stephen Freeman, the cheerful, well-liked man described by his friends, was a very different person behind closed doors. The defense argued that Mary Catherine had been living with a controlling, jealous, and potentially violent partner. They claimed he dictated how she dressed and behaved, monitored her spending, and expected her to report every aspect of her daily life. In addition to her prior testimony, Mary Catherine accused Stephen of once hitting the back of her head, and on another occasion, forcefully kicking her off the bed, causing her to hit her head on a door frame. To support these claims, her defense attorneys submitted 63 pages of angry, vulgar, and threatening messages that Stephen had allegedly sent to her a year earlier. These texts were recovered from one of Mary Catherine's old phones and dated back to a brief breakup. Because of this, Mary Catherine chose to take the stand in her own defense. Through tears, she described her life with Stephen as a constant cycle of fear, stress, and exhaustion. A living hell, in her words. She claimed that every morning she had to lay out his clothes and shoes in the exact arrangement he preferred. She also testified that the bathroom had to be cleaned and prepared before Stephen would use it. Mary Catherine told the court that Stephen frequently accused her of cheating, and those accusations would often escalate into volatile arguments that spiraled out of control. To reinforce this narrative, her legal team presented several text messages allegedly sent by Stephen. In one message, he threatened to come home and make her pay if she dared to bring up his personal lifestyle again. Another message warned that he would return that night because he missed her. And when he did, he would take her to what he called the Red Room. Mary Catherine explained that the Red Room was not an actual location, but rather a phrase Stephen used to describe nights when he allegedly tied her up and beat her in various rooms of the house. Sobbing, she claimed that Stephen forced her into sex twice, even after she clearly said no. Yet he continued regardless of her refusal. One of those instances, according to her, happened shortly after they returned from a trip to Disneyland. She said Stephen told her that since he had spent a lot of money on the vacation, she owed it to him to repay him by doing what he wanted, then coerced her despite her objections. Shifting to the night of the incident, Mary Catherine testified that what happened on August 1st wasn't driven by anger, but by fear that had built up over time. That night, she told Stephen she no longer wanted to be in the relationship. His reaction, she claimed, was explosive. He threw the plate of food she had made and pushed her with his hands. At that point, Mary Catherine said she grabbed a gun and demanded he leave the apartment. When asked to describe the final moments before Stephen was shot, she stated that he charged at her, and within seconds, he had been hit and was asking her to call for help. She insisted that everything happened so fast that she had no intention to hurt him, let alone kill him. However, investigators grew skeptical. Throughout her previous interrogations, Mary Catherine had never once mentioned being attacked or subjected to violence by Stephen. That omission became a major point in the prosecution's rebuttal. They emphasized that during her entire time cooperating with police, Mary Catherine had never claimed to have been assaulted. There were no medical records showing evidence of injuries, and no police reports had ever been filed to support her claims of abuse. In response to the prosecution's challenge, Mary Catherine explained that she used to believe her boyfriend's violent behavior was her own fault. She told the court that if she had behaved better, maybe Stephen wouldn't have gotten angry. As for her silence during previous police questioning, she said she had been too ashamed to reveal the truth about their relationship. However, this explanation was quickly challenged by an unexpected piece of evidence presented by the prosecution. Data from Mary Catherine's phone browser showed that just hours before the shooting, she had accessed adult websites featuring violent content. These searches were made while she was working as a babysitter. This prompted the prosecution to question whether someone who claimed to be a victim of abuse would voluntarily search for and view such content. Mary Catherine responded that the situation was being misunderstood. She claimed that her motivation for visiting those websites didn't stem from personal interest, but from a desire to satisfy Stephen's preferences. To support their argument that Mary Catherine had been abused, the defense shifted focus to highlight patterns consistent with someone living in a violent environment. One expert witness testified that her behavior matched symptoms associated with battered woman syndrome. However, prosecutors pushed back, arguing that Mary Catherine exhibited no clear psychological signs of trauma. Despite these claims, prosecutors remained skeptical of Mary Catherine's behavior on the day of the shooting. While the defense admitted she had expressed a desire to end the relationship, they also pointed out that she repeatedly attempted to contact Stephen that day. She cooked his favorite meal, and when he didn't return, drove to a friend's apartment to persuade him to come home. According to the defense, those were actions of reconciliation, not confrontation. One of the most pivotal pieces of evidence, the video of Mary Catherine's police interrogation, ultimately couldn't be used in court because the audio was completely missing. Although she was believed to have made a confession during the recording, the exact content couldn't be verified. In addition, there were serious issues with how the firearm was handled. Officers admitted they placed the gun in a paper bag to prevent Mary Catherine from potentially harming herself, but they failed to document its original position or photograph the scene before moving the evidence. These gaps in evidence collection and protocol significantly affected the outcome of the trial. After just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom in a tense atmosphere. Mary Catherine Hickton was acquitted on all charges. Some jurors later admitted that while they believed she may have caused Stephen's death, the prosecution had failed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And so on June 26, 2019, Mary Catherine walked out of jail a free woman. But for Stephen Freeman's loved ones, the verdict came as a heartbreaking blow. To them, justice isn't only about legal procedures. It's also about a truth that can be felt deeply by the family left behind. Most notably, Stephen's mother chose to speak out rather than stay silent. Since her son's death, she has become a vocal advocate in campaigns aimed at raising awareness about domestic violence. In her view, abuse isn't always easy to recognize, and the victims aren't always women. Men can be hurt too. They can be beaten, manipulated, or live in constant fear. She emphasizes that violence doesn't discriminate based on gender. And for that reason, the name Stephen Freeman deserves to be remembered as part of that truth. Although the court has issued its verdict, the echoes of the case haven't faded. Unanswered questions, overlooked evidence, and hidden corners that were never fully illuminated, all of it remains like an open wound in the hearts of the victim's family and the local community. What do you think about this case? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video compelling, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next case we uncover.